How you doing? This is a special edition of Let's Talk Ball. I'm Thad Brown. That's Carl Jones. We're going to preview round one of the NFL draft. And we might get into some more talk about players who will go deeper in the draft. But generally, this is a talk about round one, what the Bills should do, what to expect, what type of prospects to be found in round number one. And Carl, let's start right there. You know, to me, this year, round one of the draft is not super exciting. I think at the top of this draft, you know, almost doesn't matter what position you talk about, there is not that elite guy, or at least not that many of them. You know, there's not a Penei Sewell on the offensive line. There's not, you know, a Jamar Chase at receiver. The quarterback's even kind of average. And I think this is the kind of year where, you know, you'd rather have a bunch of picks day two than a bunch of picks day one. Now, there will be some studs in this draft, and we'll talk a little bit about guys who we think might be those players. But, you know, for the Bills at 27, you know, at first you think, well, then that's good. They're low in the draft. Well, I think what's going to happen for the Bills is that they're going to be picking from a group of guys who you normally prefer to be taking pick 40, pick 45, pick 50, round two guys, because the elite talent isn't there. Now, I think on the plus side, there are some positions where maybe the top-end guys aren't there, but I like the depth at tackle. I like the depth at edge rusher. If you need a slot receiver, this is your year. I mean, there are 1,000 of them this year. Even the depth at running back is pretty solid. So I don't know if the top-level guys are there, but the thing I go into this draft thinking is that if you want a really good or dependable player who probably won't be a star, you're going to find a lot of those guys in round one.
Not a lot of blue chippers, not a lot of guys where you're like, I don't like the term, but generational, or some guys like that. Like the 2021 draft I was looking at the other day, like that draft was Penei Sewell and Devonta Smith and Jamar Chase and just all those stud guys. You're like, yeah, that's...
Like 10 guys in that draft might go before anybody in this draft.
Yeah, like no kidding about that. So I don't think this draft is that. Having said that, though, you spoke on other positions, edge rusher, tackle, and by nature quarterback. I don't know what type of run we're going to see at the top of the board just based off of the scarcity and the value of certain of those positions. We're already hearing that, like the quarterbacks aren't going to go outside of one. Quarterbacks might not go 2 and 3 like we expected at one point. They might drop a little further. So what does that do for the other positions, even though in a normal year it's going to be edge and quarterback at the top, no doubt about it. I don't know how the draft breaks out in that regard. So I am excited to a certain extent. Most years, all right, we know 1 through 7. We got a good idea, right? Adam Schefter has no idea what's going on 1 through 5. So that is an intriguing part for me.
Yeah, it is going to be a fun, like, you know, there are some years where, like you said, first 4 picks might be done before Thursday. Outside of Bryce Young at 1, and even that I'm not a huge fan of. You know, I think if you're Carolina, I don't know why you trade all those picks to go up and get the little guy. But, you know, it's a quarterback. You have to get a quarterback with that pick, and I get it. So let's do a couple of best and worst here. First, give me your favorite offensive player likely to go in round number 1.
Well, I know this isn't the sexy pick, but Bijan Robinson, there's just what's not to like about this dude? And speak on the word generational. Outside of Saquon Barkley, I don't know of a running back out of the past maybe 10 years who compares to what he brings to the table. You want a guy who can run between the tackles, he got that. You want to go on the outside, he got you. Out of the backfield, I can bring that for you too. There's a really attractive player in a lot of different ways. On the Texas offense, they didn't really have a lot going for them. They had a backup quarterback for a lot of the year. The offensive line wasn't stellar. He was running into, I know it was Big 12 defenses, but it still wasn't a lot of room to work with. I mean, he's making something out of nothing a lot of times. So really exciting player. I remember him coming out of high school, a big 5-star recruit, and he lived up to it and then some at Texas. So whoever's going to get him is going to be a lucky team, and hopefully they already have a structure in place where he doesn't have to do everything in the next level.
I'm with you. That was going to be my favorite player. I got a second choice I'll talk about here in a minute. But I think Bijan, you know, you talk about generational guys in this draft, he might be the only one, and he won't be treated as that because he's a running back, and you just don't want to, you know, spend too much draft capital at that position. But, you know, the reason when people start talking about him going number 10 to the Eagles, I'm not blinking at it, you know. And before the Bills signed Damian Harris from the Patriots, I really thought Bijan at 27 would make a whole lot of sense. You talk about a guy that can make up runs on his own, who has the quickness. Look, if this play isn't blocked up, that's okay. He's going to jump and dart and move around and be able to find 3 yards. He's got the home run ability. He's got all the different dimensions that you talked about. So I think Bijan can be a really great offensive player. And, you know, I respect the analytics crowd that'll tell you, never, ever spend a first-round pick on a running back. There's, you know, a ton of logic there. But I will say this. Every rule has an exception, and Bijan might be that exception. Now, since I can't pick Bijan Robinson, I'll let you take him. My favorite guy in this draft is Dalton Kincaid, the tight end from Utah. And look, I think there are tackles that I might say are my favorite. I mean, Darnell Wright has some interesting qualities. I think Broderick Jones is a second-level offensive tackle, could be really, really good. But Dalton Kincaid has that speed aspect that in a speed league, I think can be really, really dangerous. Now look, he's coming off a back injury that's got everybody nervous. Played at Utah, which isn't exactly Alabama, but obviously they're in the Pac-12, so it's not like they're nothing either. But Kincaid, I think, can be an incredible weapon in the NFL. And, I think you hear tight end talk, Michael Mayer, Darnell Washington, who I'm going to talk about in a minute. To me, Kincaid is the one that has the most likely to achieve upside. The guy who really can be that A1 weapon, as a tight end in the NFL. So whether he becomes that, I don't know. He's undersized. He only goes 240. And if you think, well, 240 seems pretty big, go home and Google what the other guys are. Kelsey's 250 plus. Mark Andrews is 250 plus. A guy like Dallas Goedert still runs 250. So when a tight end's going only 240, that is a concern because you don't want that guy to only be someone on the outside. He's got to be able to block a little. And I think Kincaid's blocking ability is good, but when you talk about him being undersized, that is a red flag that should be taken seriously. All right, I'm going to, against my better judgment, I'll let you do this again. Defensively, give me your favorite defensive player likely to go in round number one.
Well, I'm going to go with the cornerback position because that's my bread and butter. And I got to go, staying in the Pac-12, Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback from out there, smooth as butter.
I love him on film. Oh, yeah.
I mean, when you watch him, the kid's only 20 years old, which is kind of scary when you think about where he can end up as a player. Originally at Colorado, and that's where I heard of him last year. I kind of lost him in the translation a little bit coming into this year.
Transfer portal will do that to you.
And then you watch a couple Oregon games, especially week 1 against Georgia where it didn't turn out too well. But after that, you're like, some kid out there at corner that's doing this thing. I know I don't like comparing guys to all-pro guys, but I can't get Marshawn Lattimore out of my head with how smooth a taller guy is with the longer limbs and how he can get in and out of breaks. He may not be Sauce Gardner in terms of the physicality and all that stuff. Once again, there's not a generational guy in any position in this draft, outside of Bijan probably. But he's so smooth for a taller guy, and those guys are rare. Most of the guys who are smooth are shorter because by nature, your limbs are shorter, closer to the ground. Of course, I can get in and out of breaks. But when you get the guy who is 6 foot, 6'1", who runs a 4.3, who can get in and out of breaks, productive enough ball skills, those are the guys who end up being Pro Bowlers and All-Pro to the next level. I can't wait to see where he ends up. I know Devin Witherspoon is another guy who might go top 10 with him. But if I had to choose between those two, I'm choosing the traits guy in that position. And Christian Gonzalez is exactly that.
Of the three guys we've talked about, that's the only one I think the Bills have zero chance at. Christian Gonzalez will be gone early. They could take Bijan potentially if they wanted to. I think Kincaid, wouldn't be a terrible option for the Bills. You talk about them needing a tight end. I projected them in our Bills mock draft special, our Buffalo Kickoff Live mock draft special, to take Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I think Mayer's got a little better floor, but Kincaid could be an option for the Bills. My favorite defensive player, I think, is a guy that might be on the fringes of being available to the Bills, but I don't think he projects as a guy the Bills would take in terms of who he is, and that's Nolan Smith, the pass rusher from Georgia. This is a smaller guy. He's like, if you build like a safety, like 6'4", 230, 240, but again, incredible speed. And if you're wondering, wow, Thad went with the speed guy again. I am buying in 100% to the idea that this is a speed league, and all things considered, I'm taking the fast guy. I don't care if he's undersized. I'm going to roll the dice with the guy that can get there faster than your guy can. And look, he needs some work with technique and hand fighting. He's not quite there yet with having an array of pass rushing moves. But when you see the production he had in the SEC at Georgia, as an edge rusher, the ability to go outside, and he has a chance to be a pretty unique chess piece because he can drop into coverage like a safety. He's built like a safety. He moves like a safety. A sub 4.40. How stupid is that for an edge rusher?
I remember that on Combine Day. I'm like,
yeah, right, an edge rusher, yeah. So, the things that could be done, I mean, you think about what Micah Parsons has done as a speed, attacking defensive player. Smith is not a linebacker, but, who knows where you can deploy him, So, now, why won't the Bills go after him? He's not a big guy. I think if the Bills, generally their profile is big and fast. So I think for an undersized guy, they're going to shy away, especially a guy they'd probably have to trade up to get. But I love Nolan Smith in this draft. And I think of all, people talk about Will Anderson, and obviously I think he's the complete guy. I think Nolan Smith is way better than Lucas Van Ness from Iowa. I don't think Van Ness is even in, Nolan Smith's zip code. Miles Murphy, to me, is another guy I don't think touches Nolan Smith. So that's the guy I like best in terms of the defense. Let's go overrated, underrated, okay? I'll let you go first again. Overrated player in round one of the draft. This can be either side of the ball.
Staying with the edge group, I understand. Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. I'm not saying he's not a good player, but for where he is being talked about and where he's projected to get picked, I just don't know if I see it. There's talk. He's projected right now, according to the betting sites, to be the first defensive player off the board, which could be all the way as high as 2 to the Texans.
That's stupid.
And I can't see that. And look.
Now, I guess if we think about it, though, Jalen Carter is off the board because of off-the-field stuff. So all he's got to do is beat out Will Anderson to win that, basically, right? And Gonzalez, maybe?
Gonzalez as well. And, I mean, they already took Stingley last year, so would you want to spend top 3
Right, if
picks?
he's going 2, yeah, I can see Will Wilson. Okay.
But when I see it, I just don't know if I see that caliber of player. I'm seeing comparisons to, oh, he looks like Myles Garrett. Oh, he looks like Nick Bosa. But can he play like those two guys? I mean, I remember Nick Bosa at Ohio State. Albeit he only played there 2 seasons, he was a monster there as a 19 and 20-year-old in the Big Ten. I remember Myles Garrett at Texas A&M. He was a monster, and I believe he was still in the Big 12 at that time. But regardless, if you're in the Big 12, which is probably the 4th best Power 5 conference in the NCAA, I need you to be at least dominant to a certain extent. And I know it's pressure rate and all the analytics, they say he's good in that department. But he wasn't dominant enough for being in that conference. And look, I get it. He's like 6'5", 6'6", 271, outrageously long arms, I believe, 35 inches. So he looks like he profiles as a guy who's supposed to be a perennial all-pro guy. But on tape, I didn't see it. I didn't see the bend. I didn't see the explosiveness off the edge. I saw a guy who can two-gap a lot of stuff and be a good run defender. But I don't take good run defenders in the top 5. I take guys who can go get the quarterback 10 to 15 times a year. So good player, but generational top 5 pick, I don't see it.
For my overrated guy, I actually had a lot of choices. You know, I thought about Murphy, lower first-round pick. I didn't want to go there. Brian Bresee, the defensive tackle who is Murphy's Clemson teammate. One thing about those two guys, I watched a lot of film where they're so physically dominant and they're together, and I'm like, are they good? Or are they just so big together that no one can stop them? Van Ness was on my list. I'm going to go with a guy that I can't wait to see your reaction to this because he's a corner, what you played in Syracuse. Joey Porter Jr. Not a fan. Look, he's super tall at 6'3", but he plays like a giant long-legged spider, but not a fast one, He can stay with guys, and he's got the length and, the ability to win at the point of attack. But, I just see Tyreek Hill turning this guy inside out, left and right, because I don't think he's smooth enough. I don't think he moves quick enough to be able to hang, with me. You think about this receiving class, right? They're all short, fast slot guys. I just don't think you want a defensive back like Joey Porter. Yeah, he might be as tall as Sauce Gardner, but he doesn't have the quicks. He doesn't have the footwork and everything. He's also a guy who tends to get grabby, a little of a penalty guy, or at least a penalty worry. So, for a cornerback, which is a premier priority position for sure, you've seen Porter being mocked 10, 15, first half of the first round for sure. And I get it. I mean, a 6'3" guy who isn't falling all over himself at corner is probably going to go high. I get it. But in terms of, Christian Gonzalez, I think is much better. Devin Witherspoon is a different type of guy, but a different player. Even Dante Banks, I think Banks has got a much better floor. Joey Porter, if he hits, he's going to hit big. But I think Deonte Banks is twice as likely to hit his floor or be better at the floor than what Joey Porter would be. So I'm not a huge Porter fan.
Neither was I, and I remember watching him early on in the year. I believe it was an Ohio State game, and I liked what I saw. And then I watched more, take in-depth looks here in the draft season. Stiff. And that makes sense for a guy who's 6'3". 6'3" guys aren't supposed to be able to run backwards as smoothly as 5'11" guys. But like you said, that's what makes Sauce Gardner so great of a player. I didn't see the smooth quicks out of him. I like Cam Smith a little bit more. I honestly like Deonte Banks, who's probably my 3rd favorite corner in the draft. Obviously Witherspoon and Gonzalez as well. Top 15 in the draft, I didn't see. 2nd round, early, that later first, if you want to take a guy and need one that bad, sure. But he's really scheme dependent. Like, he needs to be in a cover 3. He can't run around with guys. In my opinion, I didn't see that. Underrated
guys in the draft. And I bet you both these guys are going to be guys the Bills could have a shot at number 24. So you can go first.
So underrated, and it's crazy over the past 2 weeks.
And I'll say this, by the way. You can say a guy that might not go round 1 because he's underrated.
This guy's not going round 1, but for some odd reason, not some odd reason, I see it now. The past 2 weeks, he's getting shot up the board. Cedric Tillman from Tennessee. Byproduct of the fact that, you're saying, a lot of these guys are 5'9" and under, so the guy who is any taller than 6 foot is going to get more love. But I was watching Jalen Hyatt.
Jonathan Mingo, by the way.
Yeah, him as well, right. Anybody who, if you're taller than 6 foot, I mean, you're just going up the draft boards at this point in the season. But I really enjoyed what I saw of him. I was going into the tape trying to watch Jalen Hyatt. All right, I want to make sure that what I see in Jalen Hyatt, because I'm not really a big fan of his, but I'm like, all right, what convinced me? And every time I was trying to get convinced by him, Cedric Tillman was doing big receiver type things at the bottom of the screen, number 4. He was hurt this year, so his tape wasn't as flashy, and a lot of people were like, was he battling that ankle sprain all year long, so he maybe wasn't as explosive. But in 2021, against the 2 best teams on his schedule, Tennessee and Alabama, he had his best games of the year. I believe he had near 400 yards in those 2 games combined. Like, he was really explosive. A couple were broken plays, so take the yardage with a grain of salt to a certain extent. But he's a big guy. He can get in and out of the breaks, so good enough for a big guy. He can use his body enough to wall off defenders, which is always a good thing, because I don't like when big guys don't play big, which is one of the TCU guys.
Yep.
And so I am encouraged to see that, albeit my standards are a little bit lower because of the fact that the draft class isn't superb. Having said that, I will have no problem with him going. Don't know if he lasts to where the Bills pick in the 2nd round, but based off where the receivers are, I'd have no issue with taking him early or mid to 2nd round.
Yeah, so Bills at 27, he'd be too high for him, you think? Because it sounds like, and I'm with you on Tillman, you know, for a guy like that to be a Bills target, he'd have to have the speed category too. I think the Bills offense right now, even with, you know, Deontay Hardy in the mix, is still on the slow side. So if you're drafting a possession size receiver, that probably wouldn't make sense for what the Bills are doing.
No, I mean, for one, in the ideal world, I'm sure we'll get on this a little bit later, the only way they take a guy like that is if someone wants to come up and they go back into day 2, first and foremost.
Gotcha.
Or maybe on day 2. I know they don't have a lot of draft capital in this year's class, but if you go 10 spots up to go grab him or something like that, that's the only way I can see the Bills grabbing a guy like Cedric Tillman.
My underrated guy in this draft is Kalijah Cansey. I love him. I can't
Thad has been talking about this for the past month.
I can't tell you how much I love Kalijah Cansey. Now look, I know he's undersized, 6'1", 280. It's only the same size as Aaron Donald. Just put it out there. Now, but the arm length is a problem. His arms are a solid 2 inches shorter than Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald is a smaller guy. He's already on the smaller side. But look, Cansey's film is unbelievable. Explosive, penetrating, quickness again. You know, I'm into the speed guy, not the big guy. A guy who I think very likely will be available for the Bills 27. Maybe not, but I think a very good chance of that. Again, I don't think the Bills are interested because of that size profile. I don't think they take the small guy in general. But I'll tell you what, if the Bills drafted Kalijah Cansey, I don't care what pick they take him, 27, trade up for, I don't care. You know, I'd start making plans to go to the Super Bowl. And I think he would make the Bills pass rush, assuming Von Miller's healthy at some point this year. You know, it won't be before Halloween, but whatever. Cansey in the middle, Miller on the outside. You want to trade Edelvar at that point, that's fine. Whether he's on the team or not, I don't care. You would have an inside-outside combination of speed and nastiness that would make that Bills defense a whole different thing to deal with. And, you know, you put it with what we expect on offense. I know Bills fans want an offensive player in the first round. I get it. Generally, I'd probably agree. But to me, Cansey is a game breaker waiting to happen. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. But, you know, this is the guy I definitely love in this draft.
I remember watching the Q's Pitt game because that's our rival. And I remember seeing the little dude, I believe he's number 6 or 8. And I'm like, man, who is this little dude causing havoc in the middle? If it hits, it hits. I mean, once again, exceptions are all throughout this draft, every single position. So for anyone to hate on one exception and be okay with another, I think they're being a little hypocritical. This draft is full of exceptions. A couple of these exceptions are going to hit big.
All right, let's talk about the Bills at pick 27. You know, a lot of needs. You know, surprising amount of needs for a team that's still legitimately one of the Super Bowl contenders, and that's not an exaggeration at all. This is going to be one of the top 2 or 3 or 4 teams. You know, when I talk about who's going to go to and win the Super Bowl, but obviously need help at weapons, receiver or tight end. You know, could use a tackle depending on what your opinion of Spencer Brown is. Defensively, a gaping hole at linebacker. You know, maybe an argument at safety, although I think the safety position is kind of full right now. Defensive tackle, edge rusher, lower level priorities. Forget about position. Give me a guy or 2 or 3 who you think, A, could be reasonably available to the Bills at 27, B, would be at least close to the profile of what they've gone with, especially with high picks, and then C, does fill one of those needs.
Of late, the Bills have gone with the athletic, bigger guys.
Right.
I mean, whether it's Tremaine Edmonds, Gregory Rousseau, Kyer Elam, for their profile for the positions. Not the biggest fan of his game, but if you want to talk about that type of player, Quentin Johnston will probably be available at 27, especially with all the reports you're hearing about NFL evaluators not being too enthused with this year's receiving class and being very happy about the tight end class. So one group is going to shoot up the boards and the other is going to fall. I think it's a good chance that he's there at 27. Don't know if I like the value of a guy like Jack Campbell at 27, but I don't see anyone above them taking a linebacker, so he can reasonably be there. I mean, he's literally Tremaine Edmonds' athletic profile, so he can be there. those are two needs right there in that regard. We talked about tackle, and there's a couple guys who are athletic enough that fits that profile. I just don't know at 27 if they're going to be able to match the value of a pick 27 and match it with the athletic profile in this year's draft. I just don't know if I feel comfortable with taking Campbell at 27 or Johnson at 27 just because they're freaks. I think you can get better players and scrap the old formula that you had in the past.
I don't know if Campbell's a freak. I really don't like him that much in the back end.
Well, hold on. Let me preface it by saying he tests like that.
Yeah.
I don't see that, though.
Right.
Like, I mean, I think he's a smart player, and
Yes.
I think his smarts make him look a little bit more athletic on his film than need be. But, like, when we talk of freaks, I mean, Fred Warner is a freak. Micah Parsons is a freak. Like, these are freakishly athletic linebackers, and I didn't see that at all.
Jack Campbell, I think, is a freak if we're talking about 1997 football, playing linebacker where, you got to stop the run on first or second down. He'll be good in that realm. And he can handle himself in the back end, but like you said, to spend pick 27 on that guy, I'm with you. I see all the linebackers, Drew Sanders too, as mid-second round guys. So I get it if the Bills go there because the hole is that big, and you probably won't get any of these guys at pick 59. So if you're going to take a linebacker, it's going to have to be at 27. Tight end to me, the more I think about it, it feels like a sweet spot at 27 because you can get Kincaid. I think Michael Mayer. One thing about the Bills' profile, they've taken the big, fast guy, but also the guy that was kind of a project. Greg Rousseau, a guy that everyone said he hadn't played football in a while, COVID, whatever. You're going to have to work with him. Kyer Elam, not quite a fit for the system. You're going to have to work with him. You take Michael Mayer, you just plug him in tight end, and he goes. He'll block for you. He'll run routes. He'll make big catches. He'll make tough catches. He's got the size profile. He's got the speed profile. I don't know if he's going to be elite. I think he's going to be, maybe an average to above average tight end, but he will be that week one. And, for the Bills, when you think about what they've done the last 2 years, last year, why did they not finish ahead of the Chiefs or the Bengals? Well, I mean, they didn't get anything out of their rookie class. James Cook was a part-time running back. Kyer Elam was okay, and that's it. Where the Chiefs, they won the Super Bowl because they had starters up and down the board from rookies. So maybe the idea of the Bills taking the big swing or the long-term outlook, which I get, putting that to the side and saying, this year, we're just going to take the guy we know we can play, Michael Mayer, be that guy. I want to say the other tight end Bills fans talk about a lot, Darnell Washington, no way at 27.
No.
I mean, I know he's got, you talk about athletic profile at the combine, and he tested off the charts. I get it. And I think his straight line speed is excellent. I think, for a 8,000 guy, however tall he is and big he is, his ability to run fast straight down the field is incredible. But as a guy who's elusive, who gets open, who separates, I don't see it there. I think with him, you're going to be spending a lot of times running routes where you're hoping that catch radius and height, gives him the reception as opposed to getting open because he just won't be. So now you want to take that guy at 59 or mid-second round? Absolutely, but not at 27.
I remember watching Georgia this year. They have a guy who's going to be a top 10 pick next year, and Brock Bowers, a tight end. And you knew who Darnell Washington was. I mean, he was a big dude at number 0 catching passes. Of course, you're going to recognize that guy. But every single year, and byproduct of it's the draft in the NFL, guys who will just test athletically off the charts and who are freaks are going to shoot up the board a little bit more. I never saw like a first round, like I need this elite guy. I think he can be solid. I mean, I'm seeing stuff where this can be like a Jason Peters type of guy. Well, hey, he puts on like 20 pounds, and boy, he can be a hell of a left.
He
can be a great left tackle. And that's not a knock on him. It's just saying like he's that versatile of a guy. So I don't know. I will say though, with a tight end position, I don't know if the project is the way to go in terms of that way because it's such a thin line between the elite guys and then just the B plus guy at that position in particular. I mean, you got your Kelce's, you got your Kittles when he's getting ball actually, and then Mark Andrews. I don't know how many other A+ tight ends there are out there, so I will be on board with Kincaid. And if Michael Mayer is the 6th or 7th best tight end in the league, that's still good enough for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations.
Especially for a team that has been, we think has been fiddling around with 2 tight end looks and hasn't been able to figure it out. Mayer would make that work right away. In every, the idea of 2 tight end is that you want a guy that can go out there and make it look like you're running the ball and then still be a threat to catch it. And Mayer can be that. I think Darnell Washington can be that too, but not nearly the same type of threat.
The Bills have tried this 2 tight end stuff. Remember last year they brought in
O.J. Howard,
and then they tried. Who was the offensive lineman they brought in to just get that extra run? It was a lineman they were bringing all the time. Bobby Hart. Like that was another way that they can make it a 12 personnel look. But obviously they're not throwing the ball in that scenario. Right. If you can get a tight end who can do both, run routes and sufficiently block enough, that's helps out their idea of that 12 personnel look where they can be a little bit more diverse on offense.
Real quick, offensive line, we didn't really talk about it too much from the Bills' point of view. It seems like the closer we get to the draft day, Paris Johnson, Skoronski are going to be gone. Darnell Wright, I think a month ago looked like a possibility. Now it seems like he's going to be gone. Same for Broderick Jones. I do like Anthony Harrison a little bit. I think he's more of a second-round guy. But, 6'5", 315, I mean, he can move like you want a tackle to move. Not a terrible idea. DeJuan Jones, the guy from Ohio State, and I know we talked about this being a first-round only kind of thing. I think he's probably a second-round guy. Oh, my God, is he big. Yeah, 6'8", 359. He's a block out the sun kind of guy. So I would not sneer at that pick at 27, knowing what the upside is. And again, he fits what the Bills have done. So I think there's some sense there made with that guy.
I just worry about every single year in the draft, the valuable positions, tackle, edge, corners, and quarterbacks. They tend to go a little bit higher, especially in a draft class that may not have some of the the blue chippers that we're talking about.
So the second level guys will go higher than normal.
I do wonder if before the Bills even get there, all four of the guys at tackle, and then maybe even Anton Harrison. I would not be surprised if that's the case in this year's draft.
O'Cyrus Torrence, the number one interior offensive lineman, not bad. Again, I'd be okay with it, but I think the Bills have kind of solved their guard problem to now with it's a multi-year contract for Connor McGovern. Ryan Bates is multi-years on his deal. The only way you make a guard work is if you're saying, okay, Mitch Morse is going to retire soon. We move Bates to center and plug this new guy in at guard, which it seems like a lot of maneuvering, again, for a team that you want to get immediate returns out of that first-round pick. All right, round one is Thursday night. Should be fun. Hope you enjoyed this. He's Carl, I'm Thad. Thanks for watching a special edition of Let's Talk Ball.